On April 30th, 1934, the imperial city of Hue witnessed a special event for the first time in decades. King Bảo Đại decided to bestow the title of Empress upon his principal wife, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan, on their wedding day. This was extremely rare in the history of the Nguyen dynasty, as previously, the principal consorts were usually only granted this title after giving birth to a prince or after the king had been on the throne for some time. This woman was later remembered by history as Empress Nam Phuong, the last Empress of Vietnam. But her story doesn't begin in the imperial city of Hue. It begins with a wealthy family in At the end of the 19th century in Cochin, China, there was a saying, "First Sai, second Phuong, third Zhuang, fourth fire." Those are the four richest and most influential families in the Cochin region. The person at the head of that saying is Lê Phát Dat, often called Nguyen Sai by the people. He was born in 1841 into a Catholic family. As a child, he was sent to Penang, present-day Malaysia, to study at the seminary, thereby mastering French and accessing Western education from a very early age. When he returned to Cochin, China, he invested in land during the period when the French expanded the exploitation of the Delta. Thanks to his business and estate management skills, he quickly became one of the richest landowners in Cochin, China. Not only famous for his wealth, Nguyen Sai was also known for donating a great deal of money to religious projects and charitable activities. The most notable project associated with his name is Nguyen Sai Church in Saigon, one of the most beautiful and large-scale churches of that era. Among Nguyen Sai's children was a daughter named Lê Thi Binh. Her marriage to an educated young man named Nguyen Hu Hao marked the beginning of a family that would later be closely associated with the Nguyen dynasty. In the Nguyen Hu Hao family, there were two daughters. The eldest daughter was Nguyen Hu Thi Agnes. The second daughter was born Jean Mariette Nguyen Ha Vide Lan, who later became Empress Nam Phuong. When she was born, no one could have imagined that many years later, fate would lead her from the fertile plantations of southern Vietnam to the imperial city of Huc, becoming the last woman to hold the title of Empress in Vietnamese history. And no one knew that behind her beauty, education, and wealth lay a life full of vicissitudes, separation, and loneliness. When Nguyen Hu Thi Lan reached her teenage years, her father, Nguyen Hu Hao, made a decision that would profoundly affect his daughter's entire life, sending her to France to study. In the context of the early 20th century, very few Vietnamese girls, especially those from wealthy families in southern Vietnam, had the opportunity to receive a formal European education. Around the early 1920s, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan and her sister left Vietnam, enduring a month-long sea voyage to reach France. This journey of tens of thousands of kilometers not only brought her to a new land, but also opened up a life completely different from her childhood in Saigon and Dalat. Around the early 1920s, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan and her sister left Vietnam, enduring a month-long sea voyage to reach France. This journey of tens of thousands of kilometers not only brought her to a new land, but also opened up a life completely different from her childhood in Saigon and Dalat. Every day at Nguyen Hu Thi Lan School begins very early. In addition to academic subjects such as French literature, history, geography, mathematics, and foreign languages, students are also trained in music, painting, etiquette, home economics, and Catholic doctrine. The school's goal is not only to educate students, but also to cultivate the demeanor of a European lady. Living far from her homeland at a very young age was not easy. In the early years, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan had to adapt to the cold climate of Europe, a completely different language, culture, and way of life. However, thanks to her foundation in French, learned from a young age, and her diligence, she quickly integrated into the learning environment. Documents show that she was a high-achieving student, fluent in French, while maintaining the composure and discretion of a Vietnamese girl. Remarkably, despite living in France for many years, she did not pursue the extravagant lifestyle of the Parisian upper class. Those who knew her noted her gentle and modest demeanor, elegant yet simple attire, and rare appearances at the boisterous balls of the aristocracy. In 1932, after years of study, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan completed her program in France and returned to Vietnam. She was then 18 years old. Those who knew her were impressed by the young woman, approximately 1.75 meters tall, a remarkable height for Vietnamese women at the time, along with her delicate face, confident demeanor, and fluent French. No one expected that shortly after returning home, during a vacation in the coastal city of Dalat, she would meet the young monarch of the Nguyen dynasty. That encounter would completely change the fate of both of them and mark the beginning of one of the most talked about marriages in modern Vietnamese history. In 1932, after many years of studying in France, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan returned to Vietnam. She was only 18 years old at the time. At the same time, another young person had also returned after many years of studying in Europe, Emperor Bảo Đại, the 13th and last emperor of the Nguyen dynasty. Two people educated in French culture, but born into two completely different worlds, are about to meet in an unexpected circumstance. After returning to Vietnam, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan spent most of her time at her family's villa in Dalat. In the early 1930s, Dalat was a favorite resort for French officials, the Nguyen dynasty royal family, and the Indochinese upper class. Its cool climate, vast pine forests, and European-style villas made it a meeting place for many important figures. It was in Dalat that Nguyen Hu Thi Lan and Emperor Bảo Đại first met at a high society gathering. Many documents indicate that the two also had the opportunity to meet again during social activities and hunting trips, a pastime that the king particularly enjoyed. However, the path to marriage was not simple. Nguyen Hu Thi Lan was Catholic, while the Nguyen dynasty followed Confucian tradition and ancestor worship. Never before had a Nguyen dynasty empress come from a Catholic family. The religious differences caused concern among many in the court. Furthermore, the king's choice of someone outside the royal family, not from the families of meritorious officials in central Vietnam, also generated much controversy. During the marriage negotiations, Nguyen Hu Hao's family outlined conditions to ensure the rights and religious beliefs of their daughter. According to historical documents, Emperor Bảo Đại accepted the following important points. Nguyen Hu Thi Lan was allowed to retain her Catholic faith after marriage. She was not forced to renounce her religion. Children born from the marriage would be baptized and raised in the Catholic faith. These were very significant concessions for a Nguyen dynasty emperor and reflected Bảo Đại determination to proceed with the marriage to Nguyen Hu Thi Lan. After obtaining the consent of both families and completing the necessary procedures, the imperial court officially announced that the wedding would be held in Hue in 1934. This information quickly attracted the attention of the public, both inside and outside Indochina. French and Vietnamese newspapers both reported on the marriage between the young emperor and a wealthy, French-educated young woman from southern Vietnam. Many viewed this marriage as a landmark of the new era, as the gap between the royal family and the upper class outside the court gradually narrowed. In early 1934, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan left her familiar family villa to prepare for her trip to Hue. Behind her lay the peaceful life of a wealthy young woman. Ahead lay the imperial citadel with its centuries-old court rituals, strict rules, and unprecedented responsibility. She could not have known that in just a few months she would become the only woman in the history of the Nguyen dynasty to be crowned empress on her wedding day. A great honor, but also the beginning of challenges that would last for the rest of her life. In early 1934, the imperial city of Hue entered a period of preparation for a momentous event. After months of completing ceremonies and procedures, the Nguyen dynasty officially set March 20th, 1934, as the date for the grand wedding between Emperor Bảo Đại and Nguyen Hu Thi Lan. This was not only the wedding of a monarch, but also an event watched throughout Indochina. Vietnamese and French newspapers continuously reported on the extraordinary marriage between the young emperor and a Catholic girl from one of the wealthiest families in southern Vietnam. Before the wedding, Nguyen Hu Thi Lan and her family traveled from southern Vietnam to Hue. It was her first time entering the imperial citadel, the center of power of the Nguyen dynasty for over a century. The golden tiled palaces, ceremonial gates, courtyards, and hundreds of court officials created a scene completely different from the peaceful life in Saigon and Dalat. She had to quickly adapt to the court rituals, which were known for their strictness and complexity. On the very day of their wedding, Emperor Boji issued a decree bestowing the title of Empress upon Nguyen Hayu Thao Lan. This was a decision of special significance. According to the custom of the Nguyen dynasty, the emperor's principal wife was usually only granted the title of empress after many years or under special circumstances. However, Boji broke this custom by bestowing the title upon his wife on their wedding day. This marked the first time in decades that the Nguyen dynasty had a true empress, and it was also the last time in Vietnamese history.